Hello and a very warm welcome to the Space by Stenson's podcast. I'm Guy Stanley, your host, and today I'm chatting to Dean Connell, the former FF&E Director at WeWork, and he takes us on an incredible journey through the shocking reality of waste in the industry, which led him to creating and founding I-AM.D.C and acting as a circular design advocate within the industry. Very excited for this conversation, and let's roll. Welcome, Dean. Thank you so much for joining. I've chatted to you before many times. I've listened to you as well, and just there's so much of what you say and how you, not just what you say, but how you deliver it is so easy to pick up. And so I'm quite excited about where this conversation is going to go and the journey that the listeners are going to come on with us. So thank you very much for joining.
No, pleasure to be here. Great opportunity and great space, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, it has done us well. Been a pretty busy space, to be fair. With that.
What was why the colour?
Our designer did it. Our in-house designer Tracy. She just wanted something really bold because our space is, as a brand, it's all about being tranquil and people really feeling like the best version of themselves, all that type of thing. And then just to make something really strong, really different, so people can physically feel tangibly an impact when they come in.
It's fascinating because it's bold, but then it's actually quite calming to sit here.
Yeah, it's the whole sort of colour drench, isn't it? Which is... No, it's kind of brand as well. It's not exactly a brand colour, but it's like an interpretation of our sort of salmon pinks and our brick reds and our sort of cinnamon, sort of burnt cinnamons and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a bit of a palette, but it's just, I'm actually going to ask her why she chose this colour. I don't actually really know. I'm just talking. But yeah, no, interesting. It's done really well and yeah, it's been good. So yeah, you're well known for your role of head of design at WeWork. How did that come to pass?
Well, so I'm not that head of design at the moment there. And I've left WeWork in 2020. But I think I joined that business in 2013. So it's 11 years ago coming up. And I met the co-founder, Miguel, and the story was he asked me to come and join the company in New York, and gave me kind of like a week to make a decision. Kind of an easy decision to kind of go and live in New York for a period of time. So I did that. I was in 2013, and I never really knew kind of who they were this time. It was it was an opportunist kind of that came across. Like I met another designer and we were talking about music, and then he was like, you should meet the co-founder, and then I met him and it kind of just happened, and then I joined, and the main goal was to move to New York and to spend some time in New York. And then I did used to say this, I'm going to come back to England and get a real job. And I know that sounds terrible, but the main point was I was unsure about what the prospects were. I never had a kind of like visa situation. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I moved out there on a travel visa, and I would kind of travel back and forth, but I was consulting with them. That's how it started. And then after about maybe 3 months, probably less actually, I realized, okay, they're doing something quite interesting, and disrupting the idea of what the office space was. And in very simple terms, it was the office space traditionally and typically is designed poorly. It's still designed as if it's mid-80s, early 90s. And that's overall. Obviously, there are pockets of different things going on. And the mission at the time was just to make the design a lot more homey, to take all the best functional and technical aspects of the office and kind of repackage them into a way where we felt that it would give people a more emotive and connective space, connect to different people, and something that was just a lot more more like your home. You spend most of your time, at the time, this is pre-COVID obviously, you spend most of your time in the office outside of your home. So we wanted it to kind of take home away from home sort of thing.
Mm.
And that kind of was how it started. And then I went on this wild journey, launching projects for the business between, what was that, 2014, when they first launched in the UK, which was the first time WeWork ever went outside of the America.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the project that I designed and kind of led. Did some project work in Israel, Amsterdam. And then in 2016, kind of went on this crazy journey and launched Asia. So Hong Kong, South Korea, Australia, mainland China. And then in 2017, I moved to, not moved, sorry. 2017 did India and launched India, which was amazing. So Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore. And then at end of 2018, moved to China and lived in Shanghai. And that was at the point where I started doing more furniture and started working more on the furniture side of the business. But got drawn back in. So I went to visit a lot of factories in South China, Vietnam, even in India. And the goal was to kind of help the business establish connections with all of these different factories all over the world to produce furniture for them that we designed, because it was just more cost efficient at the scale that we were at the time. And that's when I kind of first started to kind of really see how furniture was produced at scale. And this whole idea, I'm sure you've heard of like fast fashion. There's a lot of fast furniture as well. So a lot of furniture is produced in a way where, for example, I went to Vietnam and I went to Vietnam, and you could go, it's like walking down the street. You're not walking, you're in a car. But you go to one factory, and obviously they take up huge space. Then you go to one factory, and then you go to the next factory. And a lot of the times they're producing the same furniture. And they're different businesses, and they export them. Because what happens, and what was happening, is a lot of designers from Europe or whatever, they would send designs that will slightly like the classics. So you'll have a lot of reproductions, a lot of classic that look like a kind of classic, Danish chair, for example, or something like that. And they would reproduce it at scale in these regions. And use lower quality materials, etc. And what's happening is all that furniture finds its way back into the West and back into the supply. And so you have this concept of fast fashion and fast furniture, sorry. And I kind of first got to experience that around that 2018 period. But then I got dragged back into projects, and I was able to launch Singapore, Southeast Asia, Jakarta in Indonesia, which was interesting. And one of my dreams, Japan. I got to work a lot in Japan. And so for me, my journey, it's funny because there's a lot of noise around WeWork and a lot of kind of, oh, this happened. And there's a lot of experts that have popped up, on LinkedIn and they give their opinions on what's going on. But from where I stood as a designer and as an interior designer, I was able to do something that, in our industry sometimes takes a long time. So, projects sometimes are like, a year. And if you're in architecture, it's even longer. And sometimes you'll do projects and they won't come to fruition. Whereas I was in a situation where I was building product. So we were making mistakes and we were fixing them on the next one. It was fast paced. It was iterative. And it was innovative because of the fact that we were able and we were empowered to just kind of express ourselves, and that we were trusted. The leadership team trusted us to deliver a product that they could sell. And then it's kind of like a long-winded intro, if you like.
It's so interesting. You definitely got your travel fix.
I did.
From wanting to go to New York to all of this.
It's funny because especially, and a slight digression, but especially when COVID came, I was like, I can't, with all the restrictions and stuff. I was like, I'm going to wait this one out because I've had my travel fix, like you just said. And I kind of felt exhausted around that 2018, 2019 period. but then moved back to London in 2019. And that coincided with my son being born. So that kind of changed my mindset a little bit. But I then took on a role for WeWork where I was head of furniture. So I was the creative director for FF&E. And my role was to be that creative in between the sourcing, procurement, supply chain teams, and the designers and the creative directors. Mm-hmm. So I would help, creative directors would be like, Dean, we need this furniture. I'd help them source things. I would help design things for them. I was designing a collection. And I would be that in-between space. So designers would ask me, hey, do I know where I can get a chair from, etc., and stuff like that. So that was my main role, 2019 to 2020. And it was in 2019 was when the IPO issues started, or the failed IPO issues started. And at that time, it was like around September times, if I remember correctly, we were called into a room. This was supply chain, sourcing, procurement, and creative direction. And we were told, okay, we need to get rid of our warehousing. And in the warehouse was like 7 years of stuff, I call it. There's another word you can use for it, it begins with an S. But it was stuff. And it was like, and it was different eras of design. It was different choices that were made, different leadership choices, because we had different leaders over the time who decided to buy certain things in bulk, who decided to invest in this and not. And so all of that stuff had accumulated in different warehouses all across the globe. So Europe, Latin America, United States, and in Asia. And so the leadership team said to us, look, this was the IPO issue had kind of come and went, and the change of leadership had happened at the CEO level. And then it was like they realized that they were burning holes in their balance sheet with the warehousing cost. And so the task was to get rid of the furniture. And from their perspective, the business case was, if you close the warehouses, it has a direct effect on them saving costs. And so the fourth stream was just to kind of get in third parties and liquidate. So it wasn't so much about the cost of the furniture, it was more about the amount of money it was costing to store, right?
Yeah.
So we were sitting down in a kind of round table trying to figure out how do we approach this? And it was a little bit distressing because there were some views to just say, liquidate it, get rid of it, it doesn't matter. There were some views to say, we can't just, we got to try and do something else with it that hopefully can add value. And in the end, what we decided to do was we itemized everything across different warehouses.
Everything.
Yeah, well, when I say we itemized, there was already like logistics systems in place and asset management systems in place. So, but what we did was we got all of that data into one kind of document and kind of started to tally it up. It was very laborious. Like, we got like all the images. We had to get all the images of everything, and we rebuilt a purchase list of everything that was in all the warehouses, and we found that the kind of value, the value of terms of when we purchased it, it was around $98 million. It was a lot of money.
Wow.
It was a lot of money. It was a lot of stuff, and so we stopped short of being like Stop Oil and going and camp out of the executive offices. We decided then what we wanted to do is present a strategy, present an actual, like a business case to them that we felt was viable, and basically buy some time. And that strategy was 4-pronged. We said, okay, we can soft mandate reuse of the objects that are in these warehouses on newer projects, because there was projects in the pipeline. So that was one. So that my job then was to work with the creative directors to basically, make settings, make mood boards, and kind of make it easy for them to specify and reuse these objects. That was what my main job was to do. And basically also kind of lean on the creative directors and say, make the designers use this stuff. That was one. 2, reuse the objects on projects that were coming due for being refurbished. So there was projects that were 5-6 years old and they were a bit knackered. And so it was naturally useful to then put this stuff that's in warehouse in these projects so we could refresh them, add more life to them. So that was the second strategy. The third strategy was we did need to talk to the market, so to liquidate. And when I say liquidate does sound like you're just getting rid of it, but you are getting some value back. So we interviewed a bunch of different companies, third parties, some companies that do leasing, some companies that do disposal, some companies that just take on and then they resell. Mm-hmm. And so we did that. That was the first strategy. And then the final one was, unfortunately, there was a lot of waste. And when I say waste, it was around about 10 to 15%. So of stuff. And a lot of that stuff, when we organized it, we found that it was poorly made. It was damaged and difficult to repair, mismatch on quantities, mismatch on finishes. And like, for example, we had I think it was something like 200 to 300 of these kind of desk units that were like laminate, ABS edges with cutouts in it for power and stuff. That it just didn't have that much kind of utility. It was just, and the designers were like, we don't really want to use that. If you go back to what I'm saying about being homey and designing things that are a little bit more like your home, that wasn't desired. And so you ended up, and I realized at that point, that waste, about 10 to 15%, really that was waste because of really how it's made. How it's made, how it's put together and produced is why it's really now becoming this challenge around reuse. Because don't get me wrong, a lot of the furniture that we reuse on old projects or we reuse on new projects was nice stuff. It was good stuff. It was good quality stuff. But a lot of it, and that percentage that I gave was where I felt that was where we accumulated a lot of the fast furniture. And it was difficult. So we ended up getting rid of it. Or getting rid of it to a disposal company and then they dealt with it, whatever they done, whether they sold it, whatever, we don't really know. Yeah. And it was around that period, so this is like 2019, 2020, where that was what has now become my main source of motivation for what I'm doing now. And it's kind of taken me around 4 to 5 years to kind of figure that out. Which is waste. Waste is an issue that I think we can all understand in our industry, and we see as designers, as builders, and we can get behind. Whereas, since that period, I left WeWork in 2020. Since that period, I've struggled to kind of get motivated by climate change. I struggle to get motivated by just the kind of goody two shoes, what I call it, sustainability narrative. I needed something that I felt was kind of that I could influence, and this idea that we are creating stuff and we are making waste, for me became something that I became interested in and passionate about, that I could actually have had impact. And so that's kind of brings me, that's like a long-winded story, but it brings me all the way to where I'm at now.
Yeah, so tell us about, it's flipping interesting now, the amount of travel and I can't actually picture $900 million.
No, not that much.
Of waste?
It was around, in total, it was around 98 million.
98 million.
That would have been crazy, but,
yeah. but $98 million.
Dollars, yeah.
I can't picture that much furniture.
It's a lot of furniture. It's a lot of furniture, and a lot of it is in quantities and volume. So we would buy like I don't know, 1,000 desks and have them stored because at the time the business was going to scale and going to do this, etc. Yeah. So it was understandable to a degree. And again, a lot of that furniture, just so I'm really clear, a lot of it wasn't wasted. A lot of it was reused.
Which was get on doing a soft mandate. Was that quite hard?
It was. it's interesting that you asked that. It wasn't hard because the creative directors and me, we all had the same boss. So you kind of, it's not that hard. But then at the same time, my job was to make it easier. And I can speak to that. And I think as a designer and I'm a workplace strategist, and I do like, strategy around how to make your space and how to impact the design, etc. It's not just about like look and feel. It's about the planning of the environment. And for me, I realized the power of making it easier for the designer. So in terms of the soft mandate, it was more like I would produce, say, a particular strategy, and it would go something like this. It would be like a 33, 33, 33, or 33.3, divide it into thirds. So I would say, okay, I would take a lounge setting. So a lounge setting would be, big rug, say a 3-seater sofa on one side, coffee table in the middle, 2 armchairs on the other side, and then say like a daybed bench on opposite the sofa. And then you have a couple lounge chairs and some side tables and little accessories. So of that became a package. And I would then create like a mini package and divide it into thirds. And so, for example, the sofa in that package might have been reused from the warehouse stock. The little accessory stuff that we bought was going to be, say, vintage. So we would buy it secondhand. So we are buying new, but it's in terms of new capex, new money, but it's secondhand product. So you got 1/3 of old stuff, 1/3 of reused stuff, and then 1/3 of new stuff we just bought new. And then the idea is that third of stuff that you're buying new, we would source, say, things that were designed in or used materials in a way which made sure that we weren't really contributing to creating more fast furniture going forward. So I don't know, an example would be we'd buy like side tables or coffee tables that would be made from, say, solid wood, and it would just be kind of a plane of solid wood on 4 legs. Now it's new commissioned product, but the way it was developed, and then I would design it. So the way it's developed and designed is that it's designed in a way where over its life cycle, it can be reused, it can be resanded down, etc.
Yeah.
So in summary, that simple package of a lounge setting, we reused some stuff, we had some vintage, saw some secondhand, and then we added new, but the new that we added became, we considered it to be more sustainable because of how we could make it. And that goes back to my point around, I realized the issue that I could contribute to, which was designing stuff. I'm a designer, I'm a bespoke designer, designing things to be sustainable over time.
Yeah.
That became the kind of niche that I got really interested in.
And I guess that's kind of the germ of the idea when it started.
Yeah.
Like almost what you're doing now.
Yeah. And so where I'm at now is...
Yeah, tell us what you're doing now.
So I-AM.D.C is my brand. It initially started as my name. It's my name. I am Dean Connell. Nice to meet you. But over the last 5 years that I've kind of had it on the go, I've been wrestling with this idea, right? I've been wrestling with, am I going to position myself as a sustainable designer? Is my brand going to be green? and is that really me? People who know me will call bullshit. They're like, no, Dean, really? So I'm not exactly an eco warrior. And so this whole thing around waste and designing out waste became a kind of passion for me. Like this idea that you can design something and over time it will prove to be sustainable, rather than designing stuff and kind of focusing on your accreditation or your certificates now. It's like the goal is really longevity. The goal is time. The goal is to let time do the work. Mm-hmm. I know that kind of contradicts with our society. Everybody wants things fast and quick. But I think after wrestling with that kind of identity, because I'm an interior designer by trade, I do workspace design, and that's what I've done for most of my career. But most of my career, I've also designed bespoke furniture. So whether it's bars, whether it's like, I don't know, unitary on a project. So it could be banquette seating, things like that. You know, I've designed a lot of that stuff and detailed it, worked with suppliers. As I said, I've got a lot of experience working with suppliers, big factories in different parts of the world. And so I was like that on one half of the brand was Dean Connell. And then the other half was me wanting to bring out that bespoke design side, where I'm thinking about how to create products, but create products in a way that they can be sustainable over time. And that became, and I thought about this long and hard, and I said, okay, I want to do something where mindset will, the mindset shift will help kind of generate aspiration to act. And for me, I wasn't motivated by saving the planet. I wasn't motivated by, the latest trend that seems to pop up in sustainable design and, oh, I've made this from mushrooms and this is really cool. And, I wasn't motivated by those things. I was really motivated by this idea of waste and designing out waste.
Love it.
And then, so for me, with the brand idea, I said, all right, in order to kind of lock that in, that way of thinking, is I'm going to use strategy like we did when we were at WeWork and we came up with those 4 kind of pronged attack, use strategy and brand values as a way to kind of present the ideology and the idea. And so the idea became I-AM.D.C circular. And it was a way to say, all right, everything that we design as far as a product is concerned will have that tag. It will be I-AM.D.C circular, or, said another way, I am designed to be circular. And so I went on this journey and trying to study the circular economy. I did a masterclass at the University of Exeter on the circular economy, and that was really good.
I was going to say, what's that like?
It was packed with resources and kind of information. Mm-hmm. And even now I've got this library of stuff that I can read, videos. So it was amazing on that, from that front. I found it was kind of, it's in partnership with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who's pretty much the leading voice on the circular economy. I found it to be heavily focused on how existing businesses can transition to being more of a circular business. And so from a definitional standpoint, to be a circular economy is basically, how do we keep objects in circulation in their original form for as long as possible? That's my kind of really short version of defining it. So keeping things circulating for as long as possible and not create waste and mimicking nature. So for me, that I can get behind as an idea. It fit with my interest, which was this idea of designing things so they don't create more waste. Mm-hmm. But I found the course to be heavily focused on things like regulation and on the systems side of it. So, for example, how could, say, Stansons become a business that is a circular business? And it might be like, oh, you take back your curtains or things like that, which is great. But it's heavily about the systems design and the operational regulation, what the governments can do, certificates, etc. It was very deep and detailed on those things. I felt it lacked that kind of innovative early stage thinking around what these things mean, what circularity means, what sustainability means, carbon footprint. What does it mean? It lacked some challenge to that. It felt as though a lot of the narrative of what the circular economy was very prescribed. Mm-hmm. And that it's and basically the mission is, how do we convince people to follow our set of guidelines? Now, I'm not kind of like, having a go at the university at all. I'm just trying to articulate how it's informed my approach.
Yeah.
And for me, I wanted to kind of see more startups who were doing this around, who had a different way of approaching sustainability or circularity, but were still kind of part of the wider umbrella. Mm. And that's what I was really looking for. And I felt there could have been more of that. There was some, but like, you know, there was one week we were like had a seminar with Philips, and like, you know, Philips talking about their new energy saving light bulb, and I was like, it's great that they're doing that and they're transitioning, and BP and Shell and all these guys are all transitioning now to being more circular. That's great, but a lot of them are the incumbents that made their wealth from not being sustainable, allegedly. So for me, it was just a little bit disingenuous at times, because I'm like, I don't really want to hear from big corporate telling me about how great they are now because they're circular. I wanted to feel a little bit more grassroots, and that kind of helped inform my approach, and why I decided I-AM.D.C circular as a tag. It's because I wanted to be able to say from the beginning, we're doing this because we believe in circularity as a way of thinking, not so much, we're not trying to kind of get the accreditation and etc. Those are not the motivators. The motivators are, I believe, we can design stuff so that it does not create additional waste over time. Mm-hmm. Very simple. And if you mimic nature, because nature doesn't create waste, then that is possible.
Yeah, it's so simple, and we've even had a panel discussion here with Gensler about just designing out waste being the most sustainable way of sustainability. Like just design it out in the first place, and it's something that people could just take more of a simplistic view, because you can have a really beautiful product with all the certifications in the world and all the rest of it could be absolutely brilliant, all these EPDs. Who even understands EPDs?
Yeah.
Like designers, we were saying earlier, designers aren't scientists. They aren't sort of like, do you know what I mean? Like can't be expected to get in and understand that, especially in the pace that we're talking about that today's world's in. And all this certification is so expensive that for a startup, they're not going to have it. So it ends up the large corporates have all these certifications that are sort of tick boxy, just kind of complying really with legislation. And you're not really making way for this innovation, which just tends to come out of sort of universities and like people that have had really like raw experiences like yourself, and now they're setting up. You're not going to go and spend 20 grand on an EPD for your new product. You're going to spend 20 grand on R&D. And there's just no allowance or space for that. And it's a big gap, and I'm personally quite hung up about it. And it's a big gap, I think, and in like the way that the sort of whole thinking is being challenged. It's kind of missing the true innovation.
It's interesting because we live in a culture now where with social media you can get cancelled quick, and so designers, developers, sometimes there's a lot of fear around, are we going to get called out on a platform for not being sustainable? And obviously the big corporates, as you mentioned, are now like, we need to have this, BREEAM, et cetera, well certified, et cetera. And all of these things are great. Those certifications are great. And I think a good point, I learned from someone, I was doing a panel a while ago, and they mentioned, there was a debate around B Corp and kind of like, what is B Corp? Is it valuable, et cetera? And people were getting kind of into that. And there was a point made by someone that, B Corp could help, be like a rising tide lifts all boats sort of thing, where the mere presence of it will mean and can mean that a lot of businesses, even if they don't pay for it, or if they don't sign up or go through the process to become certified, they might use the criteria to measure what they're doing. So in a way, that's a positive, right?
Yeah.
And that is a positive. So I'm not against accreditation and things, because I can see the benefit of that, right? Even if it means as simple as going on the website and downloading the criteria and realizing, I'm doing that as a business. oh, I'm doing that. I'm doing that. I'm doing that. Oh, I'm doing that. Oh, I'm doing pretty good. So I think that's positive, and that's where the accreditations and the kind of certificates are positive. I think the issue will come when it's just this reliance. When, for example, say for example you had to submit a form just to, as a new business, say my business, where you had to submit a form in order to get seen or to even get the meeting, and it's like, oh, are you B Corp? Question mark. And if you say no, it's like, well, it's like you go to the bottom of the CV pile.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I think that's where it can become an issue, where it kind of isolates and consolidates all of the volume of whether it's sales, production, whatever, to just big corps. And I think that's where it can be a bit dangerous, especially when legislation and governments get involved. You don't want governments involved in anything really. and so that's my kind of view on it. I think so. There's a positive there, but we just got to be. I'm with you though. I think how my mission is to work with designers, specifiers, owners, operators, because I'm all of those things. I've been inside an owner operator that delivered over 1 million square feet of workspace. So like I've been there, done it, got several t-shirts. And on the designer side, I'm a designer. I've been doing this for a long time. So I've gone through the process of, I can't specify that because I don't have the budget, or it's too long of a lead time, or it's not good enough, or etc. Or I've specified it and then it's broke and I've had to go, oh, okay, that was me who picked that. I've been through all of those things, and where I think I can offer the most value now isn't by claiming and talking to designers and saying, oh, I'm sustainable, trust me, I'm sustainable, trust me, I'm sustainable, trust me. It's just simply giving them things that they actually like. Oh, do you like this? Oh yeah, I like it. It looks nice and it functions quite well. That's great. Just so happens I-AM.D.C circular. And I think for me, the tone needs to be a little bit more understanding that the trends in design, the aesthetic trends and desire for beautiful space and functional space is always going to be number one for designers. And appreciating that and not shaming them for not knowing that what the carbon footprint is of an object. It's like, try and aggregate some of that stuff out, but do it through design. And so like, another, as far as the impact is concerned, I still put the bean can in the wrong bin sometimes with my recycling. Sorry. And I sometimes go and get a coffee daily and I don't have my reusable cup. Sorry. But for me, the impact that I can have as a designer who's got 20 years experience designing stuff far outweighs me having that reusable cup every day. Right? So for me, my approach has been, you have to have a niche interest and an experience that's authentic, and then let that be your your motivator. Don't try and just jump on a bandwagon because you'll fizzle out. You'll get found out. And so the furniture that I've been creating recently is designed to be circular, and it's kind of organized around a series of strategic design principles that, in my view, allow the product to circulate for as long as possible, which is, for me, the circular economy main goal.
Yeah, I love your pillars that you showed me.
Yeah.
Talk to us about them, because I wish like everyone listening to this would take them on board.
Well, that's what I'm selling effectively, or like that's what I'm hoping to kind of work with designers, young designers, universities, help businesses, whether it's dealers or producers. My main clients are owner operators and by proxy designers, because designers create things for owner operators. And producers, people who make furniture. And the pillars are, first thing to understand is to take the linear system. So the circular economy aims to replace the linear economy. the linear economy which we've lived under, we've been under probably a lot longer than what I'm about to say, but from a mass production standpoint, especially since the 70s and the 60s, around 50, 60 years, but probably a lot longer. That can go way back to Industrial Revolution. But the linear system effectively is a take, make, waste system. So take resources, extract resources, sometimes finite resources from nature, make them into stuff, and then it ends up in landfill waste. And that process, which is a linear process, products tend to just end up being wasteful. Now, a big, for those who are enthusiasts around circular economy will understand the butterfly diagram. For those who don't, you can Google it. Ellen MacArthur Foundation created it. And they created it's basically a butterfly diagram that's split in two sides, the biological cycle and the technical cycle. The biological cycle really deals with how materials, how they affect the biosphere, and it really gets into some of the kind of technical, and I say technical, but the chemical side of what your materials are doing to the earth, the planet. And then on the technical side really is around what the utility of the thing that you're creating. So if you're creating a table, how are the screws that you're using to fix into the table, how do they fit into this technical cycle? And the goal is to say, let's take that linear system. So you have resource extraction, you have production, then you have, in the furniture world, which I'm mainly focused on, you have dealership, so you have sales, and then you have the user. So it's 4. How do you then make sure that on the technical side of this cycle, what you're doing kind of goes back to it? So you create a circular loop with each of those steps. So instead of it being linear and going one way straight down to landfill, and each step that you're doing, you make decisions that provide the potential for the object or the material or the resource to come back to that point. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And so my 4 pillars that I've used, I've kind of taken some of that stuff and I've kind of rejigged it around, and I've organized it as to say, I've started at the bottom, which is the user, because for me, that's where I feel like most close, that I understand it the most. Climate change. Whoa, we're all gonna die. Sorry, I don't know. It's a bit scary. So whereas the user and the user's desire to have an object that looks nice, works well, and is good quality, I start there. And that's bottom of the 4 points that I just made. And for me, that first pillar is to make things and to create things that are, I call, repairably durable. So it's durable in of itself, meaning it will last a long time without you doing much to it. But life is life. Something may happen where you do need to do something to it. And at the user level, it's repairable. Said another way, and to make it more concrete, the furniture range that I'm using solid wood. Solid wood is a really durable material, one of the strongest hardwoods out there. Mm-hmm. And I use it through and through. So it's designed in a way where it isn't laminate or it isn't veneer. It's the pure material through and through. So from the end user standpoint, it's durable. It ticks that box if I'm creating my own checkbox system. So they could just leave it, and for the most part, without damage over time, if it's solid wood table, for example, it will last a lifetime, right? It will last as long as it will take for a tree to grow back, if you take care of it. Now, you may need to take care of it. And so I wanted to make it so the product, so it's easy for the user to understand. So it doesn't take some complex machine. They don't have to send it back to some special factory in north of England or whatever the case may be. They can call their local chippy up or local woodworker up and say, hey, my table's been damaged, my kids have been kicking it around, or whatever the case may be, or something unfortunate has happened, it's got a crack in it. And any woodworker globally will understand what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's repairable. And some people have said to me, oh yeah, but Dean, but you're like, cutting trees, is that great? You're better off leaving the tree cut. And there's reasons to why I think that it's okay. I won't get into now, but think about it like, I was always challenged by, oh, are you locally produced? Like, I'm a designer, so I consider myself a global designer. My design ideas are global. They're not local. Mm-hmm. So it's difficult for me, not being a producer, to say, oh yeah, I'm like, my local design ideas. I'm focusing on sourcing directly from England. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but for me, what I've experienced this at a global level. And so my view is that, okay, my material is sourced, say, from Eastern Europe. But if you export that then to the US with this principle of repairably durable, you're not exporting a problem. You're not exporting something then that if something goes wrong in California, they have to send it back to Eastern Europe and like double the footprint. You're sending it, and because of the inherent design decision, that local woodworker in California, in Malibu, they'll know what to do. So you're basically exporting a base material that can be durable in wherever it goes globally. And for me, that's of extreme value. So you're exporting the resource, the valuable resource. So that's the first principle.
I love that, by the way.
It's basically like, keep it simple for the user, so the user can understand how to reuse it. A lot of us, we go to IKEA, and after the IKEA stuff starts to get battered, what happens? It goes outside with a sign saying, please take me. And it's like
eBay.
Or eBay. And a lot of times it depends on the quality. And the quality with fast furniture like that goes down quickly because it's chipboard, laminate. So say, as I said, the kids have been dinking it around. Once the chipboard and the laminate has been damaged, very difficult to repair. Right? And so it kind of ends up one way. So I wanted to make things where even if they're damaged, it can be repaired. And so keeping the same narrative of this imaginary table to explain the principles. The second one is to be stylistically versatile. Now, what that means is we want to create objects that don't have a specific visual where they can be anchored into one particular type of space setting. For example, I mentioned a lot of like officey type tables that have laminate, ABS edges, like desks and stuff. Yeah. Typical desks, stuff that we all see every day. Or conference room tables, they have the big cutouts in the middle with the power, these stainless steel stuff. Very functional, very robust. They work very well, chrome legs and stuff. But I always say to people, those who are listening, imagine that, which most people can, and then say, if someone was giving it to you for free, would you have it as your dining table? And a lot of the time, it's like, chrome legs, weird, sometimes foldable, and like these kind of, they're office furniture. So when someone says to me, Dean, what furniture are you designing? Is it office furniture? I'm like, it's furniture. So stylistically versatile means, and if I go back up the linear chain, so I remember the linear chain, just a recap, was you had the users at the bottom, then you had the dealers who sell to the users, then you had the producers who make the product that goes to the dealers, and then you have the resource extraction, where the material comes from. So going up that chain, I'm now dealing with the dealers, and I want to kind of make a loop for them. So to be stylistically versatile is to say, hey, dealer, you can sell this to multiple people. So this table that we're talking about can be an office table, can be a work table. I've got experience in workspace design, so we've optimized it with power. We've optimized it with how you can have it as a co-working table, for example, but it's a dining table. We've made conscious decisions, so there are no cutouts in the table. That's deliberate, because if you do a cutout in the middle, it reduces the versatility of the table. So by just keeping it pure, it maintains its utility, and then you can sell it to a restaurant. So it can be a dining table in a restaurant. It can be a dining table. It can be a meeting room table. It can be in a hotel. It can be in your at home.
Anywhere.
If you like it. And the idea is by giving it by programming in all of these different use cases, stylistically, so it's kind of minimal design, you hopefully bake in more chance for it not to be wasted, and you keep it circulating for longer, because that's the goal. Keep it circulating for as long as possible.
And that goes back to the WeWork thing, when you've got to reuse the furniture.
Yeah.
It's a bit easier, I guess.
It makes it a bit
where
easier.
That inspiration came from.
Yeah. By making it just a little bit easier. And then the third principle really kind of tries to help create a loop for producers. So producers who are making things, a lot of them they're experts at making things, but they're not necessarily strategic thinkers about how the thing that they make is going to be marketed to the end user. Mm-hmm. Designers tend to help with that. And so for them, the main idea, it's not just for them, for the point, but it concerns them, is the way I've been thinking about it. The idea of being interchangeable and show personality. So to show personality was to say, let's make our table give the user the ability to have different finishes. So that affects the producer, right? Because they got to have different colors and stuff that they have to make to produce. So different finishes or different leg positions on this table that we're talking about. Or if it's upholstery, be able to change the cushions. So a client may not want red, they may want blue. They can show their own personality by making the cushions removable and having a zip on it and things like that. So that's the show personality, and interchangeable feeds into this idea that for producers, if you can design things in such a way that components can potentially interchange across different product lines, it makes it efficient for production. So for example, in my collection, the main core table, dining table, anything that has a table at the end of it, so dining table, coffee table, side table, console table, etc., they all are based on this simple module. So they all can interchange. And what that does for production means the producer can just set their machines, have one dimension and cut to that. So it saves energy, saves time, and makes it easier for them. So then we can keep the cost kind of low but affordable for the client, but keep the margins reasonable for the producer. So these are little things, margins, I think, but they help kind of make the product more efficient. And then the final one is to be honest, safe, and recyclable. And that really is about this idea of resource extraction and be honest about where you're getting your material from. Ensure that what you're making is safe for humans and the biosphere. And then finally, make it recyclable. Make it that it can, if needed, if all else fails, because remember, we're going back up the chain. If all else fails, it can go back into nature and not cause any great harm. And so the way and so all of the decisions that we make are governed by those four principles. And that means using the wood in a certain way, so it's solid wood. Using low VOC kind of stains and glues and things like that. We're still using glue. It's not a glue-free product, because, I don't believe the technology, and from my research, the technology is not there yet where we can do these things efficiently and keep the cost affordable. So the honesty part of that value is saying, look, we're not perfect. It's not perfect. We are using some glues. We're not there yet because who is? And this notion that we're all going to be sanitized, we're all going to use glue-free products, and come on. Let's live in the real world, the world that we all see daily. It doesn't feel like we're there yet. And so let's be honest about that. Let's have, use FSC wood. Those things are par for the course to me. They're be honest around your approach to those things, and how you source your material, but don't be shamed by it. Be honest about it. And so for me, be honest, safe, and recyclable. And those are the four strategic principles that will enable the products that I design to be circular by design.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I love those pillars. When I first saw them, I was like, I think the versatile, like, is so key. The versatility, so something can go into any location.
Yeah.
I think because so often, like, you might have something out there, and it's all great at the time. Then times move on, or you need a refresh, or there's a change in the business, or whatever, and it's not like it's a bad product, but you just don't need it anymore.
Yeah,
you want something different.
And two things: you shouldn't be shamed because you don't need it, like it, want it anymore.
Yeah.
And two, that's how nature works. It moves on, it cycles. So like, for me, I learned a lot of this. I say I learned, well, not. It's more kind of inherent, but I saw a lot of this manifest at WeWork, and kind of we were disrupting a market. We were kind of, saying we don't like all this boring officey stuff. It's officey. It's cold. It's, all these bright lights, 4,000 Kelvin bright office lights. And I was meeting with engineers. They're like, "Oh, you really need 4,000 Kelvin lights?" I was like, "No, we don't." And we were disrupting that. And it was like, "Oh, these guys are not respecting certain things, blah, blah, blah." And at times it was like, no, what's happening is we're kind of trying to shift the mindset that how things can be done. And now everyone's a WeWork now. Everyone's doing co-working. Everyone's kind of using homey furniture and etc. All of the brands are doing it, and it's normal now. But the idea that you can make things that are versatile, like I walk around Clerkenwell and stuff, and no shame on any of the producers and makers, but a lot of the times I don't think they realize they're selling stuff from a previous time, in terms of the hard foams, really stiff, like banquettes or kind of pods and things like that. It's very officey. It's like, oh, we make office furniture, but the market is shifting. The market is shifting. People want more experiential. They want more hotel-like. They want more comfort. They don't want to feel like, they go into a cold, stiff corporate office. And then with COVID, like, it kind of helped crystallize that, because you don't have to now. You can work from anywhere. And that's now ubiquitous across many different work styles. And I think to keep pace with that, to be versatile and to show versatility in what you're designing, I think is massive. I think designers really need to think through that. Don't make things just for one use case, because it will ultimately, unfortunately, contribute to creating more waste.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's you've covered so much, and such a mindset, more than lots of, just a mindset. It's inspirational, Dean.
Yeah,
thank
thanks.
you. What have you worked on a project where you've actually managed to implement that? I mean, I know you've obviously got your own furniture pieces now, but like before that, have you actually managed to work on a project where you started sort of actually creating those sort of circular pieces that could then be?
I think the work that I did at Sessions House, in 2022, that crystallized kind of how I wanted to approach it from a specifier's point of view. And I mentioned to you the 3/3, right? The 33.3. I won't say it, keep saying it, I'll get tongue twisted. But the thirds, I mentioned that. And in that project, the approach was, we sourced a lot of vintage. So whether it was vintage rugs, vintage chairs, armchairs, we did design new because it's in specific dimensions, etc. So we had some bespoke stuff. And the bespoke stuff was designed aligned with kind of the way my collection is done now. So it kind of takes on that solid wood feel, interchangeable, not fully embedded with those principles, but it had the early kind of foundations of it.
heading that way.
Yeah, and then we sourced things that were sustainable. So we used like natural products, and we sourced some objects from different suppliers, different vendors who were doing good things. Because there are a lot of vendors who out there are doing really cool, like, you know, the Smile Plastics guys, like they do some really good stuff that have been formed into like stools and things like that. So like we specified that, but then not everything fell into those buckets. But that was my main interior project at scale, to demonstrate that you can actually do this. And the goal isn't to say the project's 100% sustainable, because that would be a lie. It's more to say there's a strategy to offset the amount of impacts or that you are creating as far as negative impact. So you've offset it because you've sourced a lot of secondhand. That, you know, that third offsets the fact that you've then procured new, and that offsets more by buying stuff that are actually by design sustainable inherently. And it's so my furniture brand is to provide to other businesses and companies the idea that they can buy things that are inherently circular. That's what the furniture brand is there for. That's what my furniture is for. But then on the kind of the ID side, the interior side, it's to work with businesses to say, actually, you can do this. It's not going to be perfect. That's okay. But, you know, like when we were at WeWork organizing all of that inventory, I have enough experience that tells me to say, if you do it these certain ways, you remember the example I gave you of the setting? Yeah. If you can organize your furniture with these principles, you stand a greater chance of still delivering on your core mission to make your clients happy, but not worrying that your furniture has to be super expensive or it has to meet these guidelines. You can do it in a way which I think over time will get you there. And I think that's important. I think people, everyone wants everything now.
This whole fast thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Coming back.
And I think the issue that we have with, and for me, it kind of goes back to understanding nature. Nature does things over time. Time and nature go together. They're like brother and sister in a way, you know?
Yeah, that is, you're right. I'd never thought of that. But that is interesting. We do want things so fast, whether it's results in the gym, whether it's our dinner tonight, whether it's our furniture. Like, what do you know what I mean? We always want everything now. I love one of the sayings you said to me, which I've like not forgotten, is we're not taking from nature, we're borrowing from nature. And I think that's lovely, because then kind of on your chain, like if it's getting back to that is just going to go back to nature, and your table, say it couldn't be reused and it couldn't be repaired and all the rest of it. Okay, it can go back to nature, decompose, rot, and go into the earth and form goodness for more trees to grow.
Yeah. And I think like people, it might be a bit philosophical and it shows my kind of mindset. But the way I look at it is, I have a spiritual kind of upbringing, and you know, my school of mum and dad always said to me, Dean, don't do things in fear of the outcome. You do things based on the opportunity available to you, even if it goes against the grain. So my whole thing around, okay, I'm not that motivated by climate change. It might sound a bit like slander. Sorry, but it's true. It's real, and it's based on a foundation that I question whether I believe in it, because my spiritual belief says to me, well, the earth's going to be here. The you know, my belief in God, for example, says to me that he's in control. Like, why am I doubting nature? Do you see where this is going?
Yeah.
And so for me, this idea that we're all going to die and the rock's going to come out the sky and we're causing it because of fossil fuels, God can handle that. It sounds really like trivial maybe, but it's the way my brain thinks. It's like, well, no, it's fine. So if I have that, then the idea is to look at nature, and I think we've, as a society, we've become so accustomed over hundreds of years of just taking from nature. We forget to actually learn from it. And if you go back further, go a bit more primitive, you know, when there wasn't electricity and stuff like that, we needed nature. We relied on nature.
We worked with it a bit.
We worked with it. The act of tree felling, so cutting down a tree, is as old as society, man. You know, it's this idea, people like now, where like everybody's an activist, and it's not everyone, but there's a lot of that tone. It's like, oh, you're cutting forest. Deforestation is an issue. We don't want to be doing that. We want afforestation, which is, we don't want to be just cutting down forests for agriculture. Okay. I'm on board with that. We don't want to do these things. But I learned visiting the forest where the material was sourced from for my products. I learned that actually there is a symbiotic relationship between nature and man, which is not a new statement. Everyone knows that, really. It's just we've trained ourselves to forget nature. And I learned that actually when you work with nature, not against it, nature is actually quite abundant and it provides. For example, where the material, the oak is sourced from, the trees are cut, and sometimes they only cut trees that are the equivalent of a human age. This sounds like euthanasia, but they only cut trees that are around, between 80 and 130 years old. And the point is, and an engineer was explaining this to me, he was like, it's similar to like when you're an older person, you know, things start happening. And in the tree world and in the tree land, the idea, you know, so older trees sometimes get big and they block sunlight for younger trees. And sometimes the older trees there's disease and it spreads the disease. And so careful afforestation and careful forest management is they cut trees, and when they cut a tree, they can now boost volume of production. And it can take like 30 years to sprout like a whole new kind of area of oak trees. So by cutting the trees, you're actually, from an intervention standpoint, you're helping to regenerate nature. It would do it in its own time, but it would just be, as I said, nature and time go together. Like, it would do it in its own time, but it would just take a long time. It would go through natural cycle. Whereas our intervention kind of speeds up that process. Mm-hmm. And when you work with it, it's actually in line. And then I found, and I learned like simple things like the material that I'm using for my furniture is sourced from Romania. And a lot of the people in the surrounding forest, they don't have natural gas, or they don't have gas. So what do you think the material that is the trees are cut for? They sell it on the market for furniture making, but there's a huge market for firewood. This is so people don't, you know, freeze in the winter. And it's so simple. We take that for granted here. But a lot of the material is cut and used for firewood. A lot of the material, because a lot of people don't know this, to make solid wood table, for example, a lot of the material is actually wasted, maybe 30 to 40%. A lot of the material, can be wasted. So the producer that I work with, they sell sawdust on the secondary market, and they use the waste from the making of the table, they use it to power their factory. So they create their own energy. And so they're circulating the base material, and which is great. And then this is where it gets key, I think, as it relates to humans and as it relates to intervention. What it's done is it's created a valuable resource now for us. So providing we are good custodians of it, why we design the furniture the way we design it, we've effectively taken value from nature and protected it and added value to society. That creates GDP, and that's how societies are formed. Mm-hmm. Because a fundamental principle is, you know, energy, you know, first law of thermodynamics, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It is merely transferred. Yeah. And so this idea that we are going to live an existence where we don't extract some form of energy, I think is a bit of a fallacy. I think you have to expend, I think it's baked into natural law, you have to expend energy in order to get something back, right? And so by the act of tree felling is you using your energy, your labor to extract something. And the key thing is providing you value that resource that you're extracting and keep it circulating and not disform it or disfigure it so that it can't come back to nature, then I think it's fair game. I think nature allows for that to happen. I think it's my spiritual belief says to me that it's been designed that way. It's been designed that way. Like, my final thing that I'll say on that point, I've got a 5-year-old son. He loves watching the nature programs. And I don't close his eyes when the lion goes after the deer or the prey. Whereas sometimes I feel in human society that we want to stop the lion from eating the prey. But it's like, it doesn't work that way. No. It's nature. Unfortunately, something has to go for them to sustain, and
it's all part of the bigger.
It's part of it.
The bigger.
It's part of it, and we can't control it. And I think a lot of things we try and do is always to control and contort. When if you just work with it, go with the flow, I think it can provide for you. So that's a little bit like the philosophy behind what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
It's a beautiful philosophy, Dean. I love it. It's so nice that someone isn't just talking about sustainability for the sake of it, and it's actually inspired and it's been made your own, and it's kind of and it's actually come from a place like actually in your heart, like it's actually something you care about, and it's not really sustainability, it's more about designing out waste and working with nature and time, and this is beautiful. And I think it's very, personally, if no one else has got anything out of that, I am so inspired, and I can just totally personally, I'm literally buzzing. Got about 100 ideas to talk to you about after this podcast is finished. But is there anything else you wanted to say before we wrap up?
Not particularly. I think I've said a lot. I think I like the idea of closing on that thought of, working with nature, not against it. And let's try and make circular design and the idea of circularity the norm.
Wicked. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dean. Really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. It's fun.
Thank you very much for listening. I'm also very grateful to all our guests. If you've enjoyed it, please do leave us a rating and a follow. Or if you know who else would like to join the podcast, share the names. We're always open to hearing. Until next time, keep happy, keep healthy, and take care.